All right, guys, welcome to the very first Low End Nation podcast. I'm really honored to have our very first guest on the podcast, Mr. Derek Frank, bass
Honored
player.
to be here.
Oh, thank you, sir. Bass player with Shania Twain, Gwen Stefani. He's played with Air Supply, lots of local LA bands, Mindy Bear, The Dirty Diamond, and currently in Calgary with us right now playing with Shania Twain. So thanks for coming in.
Man, blast to be here.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so you're on a couple days off. Luckily, we could kind of hang out and chat bass today. So
Yeah.
I know that you're from the States. I don't know exactly where you're from originally. So
Okay, well, I'm from Pittsburgh originally.
nice.
Grew up there, kind of lived all over the East Coast, and then eventually settled in LA in 97.
Oh, nice. And how did you get started playing music then?
When I was a kid, I used to watch MTV all the time. I was
nice.
like, I was just really into music, but I was younger. I hadn't picked up an instrument yet, and I watched MTV when that first started, came out, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. I want to do that.
Oh, nice.
So I started playing guitar, took some guitar lessons. About 6 months after I started playing guitar, I discovered bass and just knew that was my instrument. I was just in a music store. I was waiting for my lesson. And I was like, what's that? And the guy's like, that's a bass guitar. I was like, bass guitar? I'm like, let me check that out. I just started messing around with it, and I was like, wow, yeah, this feels cool. I'm like, I'm going to play this.
Nice.
So I don't know, maybe a few months later, I saved some money, bought a bass, and started bass lessons, and the rest is history.
What was the first bass you ever bought?
I had a Kramer Duke. It was like a Steinberger copy, headless, little rectangle.
Yeah, the big tuning keys on the bottom end.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Cool bass, and I wish I still had it. Of course, like when you're younger, you're like, okay, well, I'm eventually going to upgrade, so I'll sell this one and then buy something better. And I'm just like, man, I wish I still had that bass, just for nostalgia purposes,
So yeah, totally.
I mean, at this point, I've some special basses that I've had for a long time that I'll never sell, just because I know I would regret it.
Yeah, totally. And did you have any training in music after that? Like, obviously, you took some lessons growing up. But
yeah, like once I started getting serious about it, I mean, I started with, just like lessons at a local music store and did that. And then as I got more serious about it, I ended up going to a school called Interlochen Center for the Arts, Interlochen Arts Academy. They have a summer program, and I went there. It's like a music camp for the summer, and I did 2 summers there. And it, obviously got more and more serious as time went on, and then decided to spend my senior year of high school at the academy. So,
nice.
Luckily, my parents agreed to let me stay at the academy, so I did a year there.
Oh, cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So obviously, you learned to read music and all that stuff through that schooling. And
yeah. Yep. Then went to University of Miami, so I kind of went the whole formal training route.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And what was the earliest music that you really got into as a bass player?
When I first started, I just had kind of like a garage band with my friends playing classic rock. At the time, we were playing a lot of like Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, stuff like that, some hair band stuff, some Guns N' Roses and Poison and stuff like that. 'Cause that's what was happening at the time,
Yeah.
So we never did any gigs. I think we did one gig at a friend's pool party.
Yeah.
And the guitarist got all nervous. He got major stage fright, and so we never did another gig. So, but that was the first thing. I started just doing the classic rock thing, and then eventually got into metal, then it got into jazz, and now I'm kind of into everything.
Yeah, for sure. What jazz players did you get into?
At the time, obviously, like some of the first people that I was exposed to were like, Marcus and Jaco. That was like, I had a teacher that was like, oh, you got to check out Jaco Pastorius, Marcus Miller, like Stanley Clark. These are the guys. Yeah. And so I started off kind of in that world, in the sort of, I don't want to call it fusion so much. I guess you could. It's electric jazz-ish music, and then eventually I got more into straight ahead jazz, and listened to a lot of Paul Chambers and Ron Carter. Gary Peacock. I liked a lot with Keith Jarrett Trio.
Yeah, sure. I guess the Jaco Marcus stuff helps pull you in when you've kind of grown up on more pop based music or funk music or metal or something like that. You can hear yourself in it a little more, and then get pulled over towards the straight ahead stuff.
Yeah, and also being an electric player, I could relate to those kind of mind blowing electric bass players more than I could really relate to the upright players.
Yeah.
John Patitucci was a big one. Chick Corea Electric Band was big on that scene at the time, and so I would listen to these bass players. It just blew me away, and eventually I was like, tried to figure out where they came from, like what influenced them, and those guys were influenced by a lot of straight ahead jazz and stuff, especially Patitucci.
Yeah.
And so then just started digging into more straight ahead stuff.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And how did you end up? So you went to school in Miami, and then how did you end up making the transition to LA?
It's interesting. It happened by accident. I mean, or the universe just intervened and made it happen. But I moved to Boston after Miami. There was a girl involved, whatever.
Yeah.
It didn't work out, and I left Boston. I had some friends that were in San Francisco, and they were playing jazz. I was kind of like, my head was in like the jazz and fusion world at that time, and I had some friends in San Fran that were making a living playing jazz, and I was like, well, that sounds kind of cool. Maybe I'll go there. And like for some reason, I just never considered LA. I'm not sure why to this day.
Yeah.
But my parents had moved to LA, like when I was in college in Miami, they'd moved to LA, and I'd been there on like spring break and stuff, but hadn't really checked it out. But I was broke at the time, and I was like, all right, well, maybe I can just move in with my parents for a bit, get a day job, save some money. So I have something, when I go to San Fran. So that was the idea. So I moved in with my parents and just immediately started getting gigs. Like I'd friends from college that had already gone to LA and were doing stuff. And so they started kind of plugging me into some things right away. And so, after about 2 weeks, I was like, well, why should I go anywhere else? Like, this is where it's all happening.
Yeah.
And so,
spot to be.
So I stayed there, and I think it's, somewhat divine intervention. It's like, no, you're supposed to be in LA. Like, so here, check this out, And it was just immediately, I was like, oh yeah, this is where it's all happening.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And what, so I guess at that point, like you said, you were sort of in the jazz mindset, but what kind of broke you out of that? And what were some of your bigger influences in like the pop funk world, the rock world?
Yeah. I mean, I was always kind of into everything. Just being an electric bass player, I never really got deep into upright. I studied upright a little bit in college, and I've owned an upright bass on 2 occasions where I owned it, then sold it, then owned another, bought another one, sold it. I think I eventually came to terms with the fact that it's just not my instrument. Like I don't connect with it, on a deep level like I do electric bass. And so I've always been into everything, and I kind of, when I came to LA, the main mentality is just like, hey, I want to play good music with good people and make a living doing it. So,
nice.
Even prior to that point, I'd studied a lot of R&B and funk and pop and stuff like that. And I was, really into James Brown and, the bass players that were involved with him, and Earth, Wind and Fire, Verdine, Larry Graham, a lot of people like that.
Nice.
I was really into a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. I had quite a similar upright experience. I actually owned one. I still own it. I bought it about 3 years ago. I'd probably played it 3 times. And just at the start of this year, I said, you know what, this year I'm finally going to put the time into it. I'm going to get some upright chops going.
Cool.
I want to play a gig. So 2 days after I said that, I'm sitting on the couch and I hear my daughter go, ah, and she's running away. She had pulled on the strings, knocked it over, hit the ground, and the back split open. So I feel like that might be kind of the divine intervention thing, whereas, just stick to electric for now, because it obviously wasn't meant to be. So
that's like, it's funny how that happens. Like that's like your sign as to, maybe this isn't the instrument. I mean, like Jocko had a similar thing. He told a story about how he had an upright bass, and somehow with like the humidity in Florida and everything, he woke up one morning and I think it had just like basically exploded, just like cracked and, into a million pieces. And he was like, all right, well, that's the end of upright for me.
Yeah. I guess you should take the signs as they come, because I was looking at it thinking it's probably going to cost me more to fix that thing than I paid for it. So,
man. Yeah, my thing was just like, I compare it to when I first picked up electric bass. Like when I first picked it up, I knew nothing about it, but I was like, this feels great. This is my instrument. With upright, with all the practicing I did, I still never felt like it was my instrument,
Yeah.
But I got to say, it looked great leaning up in the corner of my house. It was a great piece of furniture.
Yeah. My Rich Brown, a bass player from Toronto who we were talking about, a friend of mine told me once, he said, I really like the upright bass, but it really doesn't like me. So that's...
Yeah, I get that. I mean, it's a beast. It's like it requires so much physical strength to play,
Yeah.
And you have to play it all the time. And like, if you don't keep playing it, you're going to lose that hand strength,
Yeah. It's hard to believe that there's guys like Patitucci and Stanley Clark who can play both so well and have, incredible chops on both. And it's, that stuff's always just kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the limited amount of chops I had on it, it's like, compare that to Stanley or John. It's just like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I meant to ask, do you remember what the first bass line you ever learned was?
Yes, Down on the Corner by Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I remember when I got my bass, I had a little headphone amp.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just messing around with it, and I kind of figured that out. And I remember my parents were having a little dinner party. Yeah. I walked upstairs. I'm like, hey, check out what I learned, at the dinner party, and played that bass line.
Oh, nice. That's I've never heard anybody answer that one before. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's kind of a random one, but I was just messing around with it, and that sort of came out. And I was like, hey, that's the Creedence Clearwater bass line.
Nice. That kind of beats Smoke on the Water. I think it's a little more.
That was probably second.
Actually. Yeah, no doubt. What was the first gig that you got into when you were in LA? Was there or the first bigger gig that you started playing when you got there?
Well, I started out just in the trenches, just playing all the local gigs, saying yes to everything, and I did that for a while. And the first tour I got was with a Hammond B3 organ player named Brian Auger. He had a band called Brian Auger's Oblivion Express, and they were kind of big in the '70s in that sort of fusion scene. He had another band called the Trinity. That was kind of big on the London mod scene, and that sort of morphed into more of the fusion thing. My buddy Dan Lutz, great bass player in LA, he was in the band for a while, and he was getting busy with some other stuff, so he referred me to Brian, and went over to Brian's house, had a little jam. Then they invited me to do a tour, it was a U.S. tour, and then that turned into me doing the gig for quite a while. I think me and Dan traded off a bit, but he was busy with other stuff, and I kind of ended up doing it full time for a while, for a handful of years. And Brian took me all over the world. I mean,
nice.
A lot of Europe. A lot of U.S., a lot of Europe, but we also went to Japan, went to Australia, New Zealand. So it was great touring experience with him.
Yeah, and a great musician. He's on your first record?
He is, I had him play one song on the first record. I mean, he's incredible. It's just one of those guys. It's just immediately when he puts the hands on the keys, he just, it's like Jekyll and Hyde. He turns into this monster, just a look on his face. Just so much passion in his playing, and just, I mean, every night just going for it, and just so much depth and meaning to everything he plays. It was a great experience touring with him.
Yeah, great experience, after moving to a new city like that too, to play with somebody that's got that kind of passion for it. For
sure. For sure.
Yeah. What was, after you've been in LA now, you said for 26 years?
Almost 26 years, yeah.
So what was the first gig that you got? Maybe it was the Brian gig that, you landed after you got to LA, where you really felt like you were, kind of doing what you set out to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of always felt that way. I don't know. I always wanted to go on the road. That was the thing. I was like, man, I want to be on the road. You hear these stories, people saying on the road, And I always wanted to do that, But it took me a while to get there. I was in LA probably for almost 5 years before I got that call to go on the road. And I was doing tons of local gigs. I had a band. I was playing all these different original bands, doing all the Sunset Strip stuff and all that, and also playing weddings and just all the things you got to do to just make a living playing music.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed all of it. It was great. But when that call came in to actually go on the road, I'm like, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And that was really. Yeah, really fun.
That was the one. Yeah.
And then that was the first one.
Yeah. And then how did the Air Supply gig come about?
Yeah, it was interesting. So that I played with them in 2016 and 17. I was playing with Shania in 2015. Then she took a break from touring to do a record. So 2016, I was kind of a free agent again.
Yeah.
And my buddy Aaron McLean, he's a guitar player that I'd played with in LA back in my early days, probably 98, I'd played with him. We were both playing in cover bands that would kind of do the same circuit, and we got to know each other through that. And then I started doing gigs with him in his original project. He ended up playing with Air Supply and becoming their musical director, and the bass player couldn't do a tour. It was an Australia, New Zealand tour, and he just called me. He's like, hey, do you want to do a tour with Air Supply? And I was free. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing anything this year.
Yeah.
And so it was cool. They're great guys. Air Supply is basically a duo. It's Graham Russell Hitchcock. Yeah. And Graham kind of handles it. He's the main songwriter. Yeah. So he had Graham call me, and we just kind of had a little chat on the phone and kind of got along. He's like, yeah, come join us. It was great. Nice. It was not like an audition or anything. It was just kind of like Aaron's word, and then Graham just having a little chat with me. And so no rehearsal, just, I met the guys at the airport, went to New Zealand, and, you know, my first gig with them was in an arena in New Zealand.
Nice.
And it was just cool. They're very laid back. They're just like, hey, learn the material, and, you know, we trust that you'll show up and, you know, and be good.
Oh, cool.
And, yeah, so I worked with them for about a year and a half. Oh, nice. And then Shania started getting busy again, and I opted to go with Shania.
Yeah. And some great bass parts on the Air Supply stuff too.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely some stuff to chew through, I'm sure, for getting that stuff down.
So. It was a fun gig, and it wasn't really on my radar at all. But of course, like, you know, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and I knew, you know, a lot of those songs. And once they sent me the set, I was like, oh yeah, this song, I remember this one.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed playing with them.
Yeah, for sure. And then how did the Shania gig come about?
So that I started in 2015. My good buddy Josh Gooch, he's an amazing guitar player. He spent about 10 years playing with Shania.
Nice.
So 2015, he called me for this little blues gig he was doing at this hotel bar, and it was just like a day of call, like, bass player can't make it, come down, like. So I had the day free, so I learned all the material. I came down. We had a great time playing together, and we were just chatting. And I didn't know him well. Like, I used to host a jam in L.A., and he came down a couple times to play at the jam, and I knew him from that.
Yeah.
But he called me for this blues thing, and like I said, we had a good time playing, and I was just kind of asking, like, oh, what's Shania doing? Because he had just finished the Vegas residency with her at Caesars.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I think we're doing a tour. She might be changing the band up. He's like, if she does, like, would you be interested? And I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
You know, who's going to say no to that?
Absolutely.
So, I said, yeah, let me know. I'd be way into it. So he passed my info to the musical director at the time, who was this guy named Will Hollis, who I had already done tours with Will. I did the Dancing with the Stars tours in like 2007 to 2009.
Yeah. Will
had hired me for that. So he was like, oh yeah, I know Derek. Great, cool. So Corey Turco, her longtime guitarist, fiddle player, kind of band leader, he was kind of dealing with her also, sending stuff in. So I sent stuff to Corey, just like links, just like some videos and stuff like that, website.
Yeah.
She kind of narrowed it from all the videos that got sent to her. She narrowed it down to 4 bass players and 6 drummers that she wanted to see, and a couple other people were in Nashville that she didn't audition. She was only auditioning bass players and drummers. So I went down to this audition. Great audition. It was like an all-day thing. Like, every bass player played with every drummer. So it was really cool. Like, you really got a vibe for who's going to work together.
Yeah.
So I did the audition, and a few weeks later, ended up getting the call.
Ah, great.
Yeah.
Was it a big change at playing with any of those artists? Was there a gig where you thought, this is really a big, like, I assume with Shania's gig, there's probably, you know, all of a sudden you're into choreography and things like that, or was that just something you kind of got used to over other gigs?
There wasn't much choreography. It was more like on those gigs, it's kind of just blocking. It's like they tell you where to be at what time, and once you're there, like, whatever you do, you know, just okay, stand here and rock out, you know. So it's
look cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. And I mean, you know, playing in a lot of cover bands and stuff like that, like I'd done some choreography. Like I was used to performing and, you know, not standing in one place looking at my feet, you know. I was used to being active on stage. Yeah. And you know, just looking at videos, you know, I always look to see like what the vibe is, like what the previous, you know, bands have done as far as performance and stuff like that. So, you know, once we got into things, it's just they have a choreographer, basically, just like I said, they tell you to stand here at this time and rock out, whatever. So you know, they just kind of leave it up to you how you perform. You just have to be at a certain spot on the stage.
Oh, nice, interesting. Yeah. And is there, on the Shania gig as it is now, do you have to play synth much, or is that just a little bit of the gig? You know,
it's interesting. I'm changing it up a little bit this time around, because I historically, like, well, since my time in the band, I would play synth on one song in the set. That don't impress me much. We do the pop version of that song. There's a couple different versions, but we do the pop version, and it's a synth bass line. So I had always played synth on it, and then this time around, I don't know. I just kind of decided to change it up. She hired a different musical director. A guy who produced her record ended up acting as musical director, and we were talking about it. I'm like, do you want me to play synth? And he's like, well, maybe we can leave the synth on the track, and you can just play bass on top of it. And I was like, what if I just like got a synth pedal and then, you know, did that? Cause I'd rather just play all the bass myself, not have anything on track.
Yeah.
And so I messed around with a synth pedal. I got the C4 synth pedal from Source Audio.
Oh, nice.
And ended up programming some sounds on that. So I'm just playing, you know, for like 3 songs in the set that require synth bass. I'm just using the pedal.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm splitting my signal. I have a clean DI. I use my Noble DI,
Nice.
and then I have a Kemper, but I have the synth pedal in the effects loop of the Kemper. So So front of house is getting a dry signal from the Noble, and then the synth pedal, and we blend the two, and so far it's worked out pretty well.
Oh, nice. What other gear are you using on the Shania gigs?
So on this tour, I'm using 3 different basses. I'm using 2 Sandberg basses. One is it's a California VM2, I believe. It has 2 Music Man pickups.
Okay,
It's one of their new super light series. It's less than 6 pounds. It's amazing.
Really?
Super light bass, which is great for just running around the stage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'm playing that. I've got it tuned BEAD.
Nice.
And I'm playing it in passive mode.
Yeah.
And then I've got another Sandberg that's got a P pickup and a Music Man pickup.
Oh, nice.
And that I have tuned down to B flat. It's even a half step lower than the BEAD.
Yeah.
And same thing, running it passive.
Yeah.
I've got Nordstrand pickups in that are great. I love that bass. It's killing. And then I've got a short scale Music Man Stingray.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And that's tuned a step down, and it's passive.
Yeah.
And I got flat wounds on it.
Oh, nice. Yeah, and anymore with a lot of them, the modern country stuff, or with a lot of pop stuff, I think that low D at the least is needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand why you'd have things tuned down B and B flat. So a lot of stuff is in B flat. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I've always done that on her gig. Like when I first joined the band in 2015, like I don't play 5-string unless I have to. Like I'm just more of a 4-string guy.
Yeah.
And her stuff, a lot of it was in the 90s when a lot of the low stuff was happening. But actually on most of her stuff, it's actually synth bass.
Yeah.
But it's it's made to sound like real bass, and so it's always I always play real bass on it. But some stuff is really low, and so even when I started, I was like, well, let me see, maybe I'll just tune down. And so I started doing the BEAD thing, just like the first 4 strings of a 5-string.
Yeah.
And that's worked out well. And then some keys are dropped and things like that. And there's a couple that are in B flat. And it's just fun to at the end of the song hit like that thunderous low B flat.
Yeah.
Like both that don't impress me much, and Man, I Feel Like a Woman are in B flat.
Yeah.
And so it's just cool to hit that bomb.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I would assume when you're tuned BEAD or B flat, you're using like typically the bottom strings of a 5-string set at that point.
Yeah, I use Labella strings, and they make me some custom sets that are
nice.
that are like
Yeah. And then when you're on a bass where you're tuning just down a whole step, are you just using a regular same kind of gauge you would when you tuned to E?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got Labella low tension flats on the Stingray. They make them short scale too. So a short scale set of those, and I just never change them. Flat wound strings are just meant to sound dead and thuddy. So
yeah, and the low tension flats are great.
I love them. They're great.
Yeah, I
They're
tried
comfortable.
Tried out the deep talking bass, but it was a lot of work on the fingers. They were super tight on the
real high tension
P bass there.
Yeah, for sure.
Sounded great, but I was tired by 3 songs in.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. Yeah.
Right on. And you on the Shania gig, is this tour? You're no amps on stage?
No amps. It's always been a clean stage since I joined the band. So, and I experimented with different ampless rigs. Like over the years, so many people are going ampless now.
Yeah.
Both on local things and big stages, and so I've experimented with so many different ampless situations. I've tried to go all analog. I kind of resisted the digital thing for a while, but then eventually got into the Kemper, and once I did, I'm like, there's no turning back. It's like thing's a magic box. It can sound like anything you want it to sound like.
Yeah.
So I'm and I've profiled my Aguilar rig, and I've gone through a bunch of online on their rig exchange. Like all these people upload their rigs, and you can just check out hundreds, if not thousands, of rigs. And I settled on a Mesa Boogie profile that I liked a lot, that I just found on the rig exchange.
Oh, nice.
And then I use I experimented with a bunch of different impulse responses, like different mics, different cabinets. And I ended up using an impulse response. It's an SVT 810 cabinet with an RE20 mic on it, but the mic is like in the room position, so it's like the mic is in the middle of the room. I don't know. I spent hours just finding the right tone, because it's in my ears. I want it to sound exactly the way I want it. Just want it to be inspiring. So that's what I ended up using. So that's my main rig for it, and then with varying degrees of dirt, just overdrive on the amp, and then there's some things where I'm using some effects in the Kemper, some dirt effects and whatnot.
Nice. Yeah, a lot of the stuff's not much beyond dirt and the synth sound that you need here and there.
For sure.
Not like you're looking for envelope filters and wah on that gig too much.
No. There's, aside from like you said, the stuff that I'm using that synth pedal for.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Was there, since the time you've been with Shania, was there a gig that just kind of blew your mind? Is there any gigs that you played where you looked out and thought, this is crazy? There's
been a couple. I mean, it's been a great experience, and we do mostly arenas, and the arena shows are great, but most of them are kind of similar. You're playing in a similar kind of venue with a similar kind of crowd, similar size crowd. But we've done a bunch of festivals, and the festivals are always a blast. We played the Stagecoach Festival in California in 2017. That's one of my favorites. That was pretty epic. Okay. We played one in Brazil that was like 100,000 people in a soccer stadium. That was pretty insane as well.
Yeah.
I think those are two that really stand out to me.
Oh, nice.
And we've got a few festivals this year, so
good stuff.
I'm looking forward to those.
Yeah. Those festival gigs are just a different energy for sure, because it's
absolutely.
It's usually hardcore music fans, I think, for the most part. So
tons of people. They're usually hammered by the time we get on stage, so it's always a rowdy crowd, and it's cool. Yeah, they're fun.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's kind of the Shania gig. How did the Gwen gig come about? And for a while there, you were juggling both.
Yeah,
so
I got
did
pretty
you manage
lucky on that one. Yeah, it's interesting, man, how the universe takes care of you sometimes. So like we were talking about Air Supply before. So I had quit Air Supply because we were doing a bunch of promo stuff with Shania. I was subbing out a lot, and then Shania announced her 2018 tour.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm just gonna, bow out of Air Supply now, free up my schedule.
Yeah.
So I finished out 2017 with Shania, and then in January I got a call from the tour manager saying that she wasn't going to use a bass player on the 2018 tour. So I was like,
oh, geez.
Just quit a gig. So, but luckily, it's interesting. Right after that, I got a call to go out with an artist named Daniel Powder. He's a Canadian artist, and we had a tour in China. While I was out there, like the third day I was out there, Will Hollis, who was the MD for Shania that hired me for Shania, called me. He had gotten called to put a Vegas residency together for Gwen.
Okay.
And it was like starting like in a couple weeks. I think she had already had a bass player, but he decided to leave Gwen because he joined the band Vampire Weekend.
Okay.
So like a few weeks before rehearsal started, they needed a bass player. So it started like right when I got back from the Daniel Powder tour. So I'm like, great.
Nice.
So that was another one that like no audition, just, hey, can you do this? And so so as soon as I finished Daniel, I went right into Gwen, and
oh, wow.
Yeah, played with her for about 4 years. So 2018 was all Gwen because Shania was out doing the thing, so it was all Gwen. Then at some point in 2019, Shania showed up to our Vegas residency, and I was like, wonder what she's doing here.
Yeah.
So turns out she was just kind of scoping out the theater because she was planning a Vegas residency. So then she ended up doing a Vegas residency in that theater. Asked me to come back. Yeah. And so the good thing is I was able to juggle both gigs. They didn't overlap because they were both, the way the residency works out, you're like, you go out for like 3 weeks, and you do that about 4 times a year. So you're not there all the time. Yeah. And so the artists rotate. They would rotate like 5 different acts in that theater.
Okay.
So luckily I was able to juggle both gigs for a while. And
that's kind of cool. Yeah.
I got lucky on that one.
Yeah. You wouldn't
planets aligned on that one.
Yeah. You wouldn't figure that would work out very often, but, what was the experience of doing the residency like as far as performing? It
was great. I mean, it's rare that doing a gig like that, you get to be in one place. Yeah. And Vegas is really close to LA. So I could go home on days off, nice. Or my wife could come out and hang out. It's just, it makes things a lot easier.
Yeah.
And it's an easy gig. Like we would do typically 3 nights a week. Like typically the residency schedule is Wednesday, Friday, Saturday.
Oh, nice.
And the rest of the time you're just out there,
Yeah.
There may be some rehearsals if you're tweaking the set. There may be sometimes we would do private gigs like corporates, but in the theater. Like a corporation would be out there and they would actually rent the theater and we would do a private show. So we would do that sometimes as well.
Oh, nice.
But most of the time we've got days off, so, you're out there for 3 weeks, you do 9 shows.
Yeah.
That would be typical.
Yeah, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, pretty cake gig. And then, then juggling both, Shania usually rehearses in Vegas because she has a place there. So,
gotcha.
There were times where I'd be in Vegas for like 2 months straight because like we, between Gwen and Shania and doing rehearsals.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of Vegas. I got really burnt out in Vegas, honestly. But
my limited experience of Vegas is that it's a great place to get out of.
Tell me about it. I mean, I would do this thing like every time, like whenever that 3 weeks was up, and I would drive back. My wife would usually be with me, and she'd drive back with me. And like, first thing I would do was put on Sheryl Crow, Leaving Las Vegas. After we drove away, I was like, man, just a fitting song. And I was just like, man, I just can't wait to get out.
Yeah, that's. I've been there once, and the night before I had to leave, we were out for drinks, and somebody put something in my drink, so.
Really?
Oh my God. The rest of my night was a blur, and it made for a painful flight home the next day too. So
crazy.
That was after that I thought I don't need this. But I mean, when you're there and you're looked after, and it's a different story, right? So,
yeah. And I mean, we find stuff to do. Like I go out in nature. Like I'd bring a kayak out with me, and days off I'd go out to the Colorado River and do some kayaking, or like we go hiking. There's actually some really good hiking out there.
Some really nice stuff out there for sure.
Yeah. So we just kind of do that. That's the only way you can really stay sane. Because if you're just like hanging out on the Vegas Strip every night, it will kill you.
Yeah. No, I don't. I think about 3 days of that is probably all anybody should have in them anyway. So
So I'm stoked that this year Shania decided to tour and not continue Vegas. I mean, there's always a chance we'll get back, but it's just nice to like have a change of scenery now.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, the tour. She's at a point in her career where she's looking to not work, so hard. So you've got some days off, and you can, because a lot of, when you talk to touring musicians, like you're kind of from, bus or plane to hotel to venue to, you don't really actually get to take in the places that you're at. So on this tour, it sounds like you get a chance to actually enjoy some scenery and just
we have some that are in and out, but like for the most part, like I said, we don't really do more than like 4 shows a week.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I've been on those tours where you're in a van carrying your own gear and you're trying to string together as many gigs as possible just to like, pay for the tour, know.
For sure.
It's nice.
A little nicer way to travel.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into, so you have 2 records of your own out, and I want to talk about them because I've checked them both out, and the playing on them is killer. The tone on them is incredible.
Thank you.
So I guess what kind of inspired you to write the first one was called Let the Games Begin.
Mm-hmm.
So what inspired you to put your own record out, and what inspired the sounds on it?
I think all musicians need to do something like that. All of us working musicians that are used to playing other people's music. I think at some point, just for our own, to satisfy our souls, we just need to do our own music. And I got to that point where I was, just being a working musician in LA. I was doing tons of stuff, but I wasn't doing anything of my own. So 2009, I did my first record. I wrote that when I was out on the Dancing with the Stars tours, and that's like when I wrote the record. I would just be in the dressing room in between sound check and the gig, jotting down ideas. And when I came back from that tour, went in the studio and did the record. And it took me a while to do the second one. I got busy with other things, working, touring, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then it was always kind of on the back of my mind that, okay, I want to do another record at some point.
Yeah.
And pandemic hit, and I was like, all right, well, now's the time. Like we came back, we were in Vegas with Shania, and ended up coming home, and we didn't know when we'd be back. So it's like, all right, well, I'm going to start writing. So I immediately just like started writing the new album, and it came together pretty quickly. And, we left Vegas in March, that's when everything shut down. And then we recorded the album in July.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty quick to put it all together and get it.
Yeah. By the time we actually got the band together and we went to the studio and all that, everybody was just so excited to play because none of us had done anything with other people in a while, and it just felt really good. Yeah. Obviously, like at that time, like we had to make sure we tested, took our COVID tests, wore masks, all that stuff, But it was just great to actually make some music after a few months of not seeing anybody or not playing with anybody.
Yeah, for sure. And so the albums, there's definitely a lot of P bass on these albums.
Definitely.
So what instrument are you? I know you have a 63. Is that what's?
Yep, the 63. Yeah, I mean on the first record, what did I play mostly on that one? Still have it as a cylinder jazz bass. It's more of that like active jazz bass kind of Marcus vibe, and I played that on the first record. I think I played the 63 P bass on I definitely played the 63 on that record too.
Yeah.
But the new record is more like there's not any slap stuff on it. It's all finger style. It's mostly flat wound P bass kind of stuff. So I have a 63. I had a Labella Olinto P bass that I used for the round wound stuff.
Yeah.
Because the 63 always has flats on it.
Yeah.
Played those two. What else did I play? I brought a few into the studio. I have a 73 Mustang that I brought in. I can't remember if I played that on anything.
Yeah.
But I think it was mostly the 63P and the Labella Olinto.
Yeah, the Olintos are really cool basses.
Yeah. I ended up selling mine just because I wasn't really using it much, but like, I mean, it was the best sounding P bass I've ever owned, and
nice.
they're making some short scale like Mustang type basses now, and I'll probably get one at some point because they're amazing instruments.
Yeah, they just kind of, well, at least for me, they kind of came out of nowhere. I just saw somebody playing one and thought, man, that sounds like a vintage P bass, and that's what most people are looking for. So
yeah, I discovered them at the NAMM show, and like my buddy Brian Ciono had one. He was hanging at the Aguilar booth playing it. I was like, man, that thing is cool. He's like, go talk to them. They got a couple over there. So I went and chatted with him. I was like, man, I need to order one of these.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, we'll take a listen to some of the tracks on the record, because I want to talk about a few and just find out exactly what the inspiration for some of the songs was, and B, what you're using on them, because there's some really cool effects. And like I said, I'm a big fan of the album. So
cool. Thank you.
Let me dig in. We'll start with, so the first track on the record is called Get 'Em. And to me, it's definitely sounds like it could be on the Anchorman soundtrack.
Yeah, it's like my 70s cop show, whatever kind of thing.
Yeah, with a bit of some Yaz flute.
Yeah. Well, here's a fun fact you might not know. The guy who's playing flute on that is the guy that actually played the flute solo on Anchorman.
Oh, really?
Yeah. His name's Katis Buckingham. He's like one of the best. I mean, I played in a band with him for years. He's a good buddy of mine, and one of the most amazing jazz flute players out there. He's incredible. And so we were in a band together when he did the Anchorman thing, and we were recording our album back then. And he was like, "Yeah, I got this session. I'll show up at the studio later." And we're like, "How was your session?" He's like, "Oh, it was great." He's like, "It's this like new Will Ferrell movie where like there's some scene where he busts out a flute and starts playing, and so I played the flute solo." So
that's incredible.
So it's funny that that's him.
Nice. Well, I guess it makes sense why I heard that. But we'll take a listen, because this very first bass part that comes in is really cool. So let's give this a shot here. There we go. Yeah, cop vibe for sure. Yeah, and the double thumb chops. So what you're obviously using a wah on that, and what bass are you playing there?
That's my 63P.
Nice.
I believe, God, I gotta think about it again. Yeah, that's a 63. Yeah. 63P with the Dunlop Crybaby, the bass Crybaby, white wah pedal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a super cool sound, and I let that riff with the double thumb is.
Thanks, it's fun. Awesome. I like doing that stuff, kind of like emulating a guitar. I did it on the first record too. I don't know, the first record I opened up with kind of a similar kind of cop show thing, and Katis, the flute player, also played on that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's just something about it. I was like, you know what, I'm going to open this record with another 70s cop show tune. So I wrote another song like that, and I was like, and it's interesting because that one. The horn section is a horn section from Vegas called the Fat City Horns, and they're amazing. And I had their horn arranger do the arrangement. I went out there to record it, and we had a trumpet solo on those bits where there's a flute solo originally. And for some reason, just once we got into the studio and we were like mixing and stuff, it just like, I don't know, the trumpet wasn't really working, and I was like, it's like maybe I should call it Katis again. So I called him, like, what are you doing? He's like, nothing, just hanging in the backyard with the dogs. I'm like, can you just bust a flute solo real quick? We'll send you a track. He's like, yeah.
Oh, nice.
I sent it to him, and then it ended up with another flute solo.
Yeah, worked great. Actually, and I noticed that, like you said too, like trying to sounding a bit like guitar on the first record on the track is called Lunchbox.
Oh, okay.
I think I'm gonna play that
That's
one.
Okay.
I actually, this bass riff I really dug, but it's the end of this, like that.
Yeah, that's the same kind of thing. The thumbnail, double thumb.
Yeah.
I keep my nail a little bit long so I can kind of use it like a pick.
Yeah. because that actually at first I'm like, that really sounds like guitar, but I knew it was obviously the bass line, but is it really interesting sound. So I'll get you to demo that for us.
Cool.
When we get a chance. And I guess so like you said, Get 'Em was really kind of inspired by growing up in the 70s and seeing all the cop shows and that kind of stuff.
Definitely.
What about That's What She Said? So I'll give that a quick play, and then there's a couple things in that one I want to ask you about. So.
Cool.
And that one I hear definitely feels like there's some Rocco influence to that one.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, there's Rocco all over this record.
And I had made a note that there's a really cool line at 50 seconds here, so we'll see what that was.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Just kind of was that a line that just came to you, or was that something that took a bit of time to work out?
The melody line?
Yeah.
Well, I came up with the groove first, like the turnaround, because it's kind of like a blues-ish form. It goes, the form is like 1-4, and then there's like a turnaround, and the turnaround I kind of came up with like the chords, the descending thing first, and then came up with that just kind of weird disjunct groove, and I'm like, I was just kind of thinking, okay, well, what would be cool over this, and I was like, maybe just some like super busy weird line over top of this like syncopated, groove thing. And so I just kind of like started messing around with stuff and just came with that. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to displace that and then just go a half step down.
Yeah.
It just came from me wanting to do something weird.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah. And some of the players that I've had in my band hate me for that one because it's just a bitch to play.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm like, what are you doing? Here it is. Come on. What's wrong with you? But I'm like, well, I'm the one that wrote it, so I can play it.
I've been working on it for a bit. There's also, again, some really, I'd say That's What She Said is my favorite track on the whole record, but I really like the playing at 3 minutes here. It's kind of the rhythmic stuff under the organ solo, just, again, keep it. I like that you're keeping it simple, but really grooving on it too. So it's, and then we're kind of into the chorus, but then we've got that same line that we were just talking about at the end here. We'll chop up all my awkward talking, don't worry.
Yeah. Chop up mine while you're at it.
Yeah. And my scrolling. All right, so this is the same line, but basically with everyone playing it, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a fun one.
Yeah.
That's a fun one.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the cool things about like being a working musician but doing a solo project is that like I can do all the things that I don't get to do on my, on my gigs.
Yeah.
I can't do stuff like that with Shania. It just doesn't fit.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's like having my own gig, I can get all that stuff out, play all those notes.
Yeah, nice to have that outlet for sure.
Sure, yeah.
So just some really cool stuff. Like I said, the like there's definitely that I can hear that Rocco influence. At least that's what I hear. But there's also, you start getting into a couple tracks that are a little bit more like Government Mule influence.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is a band that I accidentally saw Government Mule when I was 18 years old, opening for a Canadian band called Big Sugar.
Okay.
And after that, I was, I found every Government Mule record I could, and I was showing it to everybody. So, but it's so obviously a bit of an influence on this record.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like this record kind of took on a few different genres and a few different influences. Like it's not all, funk, whatever, jazz funk. It's like there's definitely like some southern rock and a little bit of blues and a little bit of like riff rock kind of stuff in there.
Yeah.
It just kind of went there. I don't know. I was just listening to a lot of different things, and I just was just trying to figure out how to incorporate some of these influences into like an instrumental format. So,
and it's a really good, sort of portrait of all of the things that you do on bass. Like it's all of those influence come out onto a record, and it all flows. Like it's interesting how all those different genres can melt together and actually work really well. So
cool. Thanks.
There's a I said very like kind of a Sly and Marcus influence track. I think that's Give It What You Can. Which
that's actually a cover. It's kind of covering the Meters version. It's originally a Sam and Dave tune, and then the Meters covered it.
Yeah,
it's a vocal tune, and I played it. I have this like soul band that I play with in LA, and we do that. And then I was just kind of thinking, I love playing. It's just so fun with that da 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 don't da 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 don't. Fun bass line. I was like, maybe this will work instrumentally. So we tried it, and we made it work.
Yeah, let's just we'll take a quick listen to that one too.
Cool.
That's great track. Oh, hold on, we're still on. That's what she said. Here we go. Yeah. And is that P bass?
That's P bass. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And all those little like slides and little things, that's just me like emulating the guitar on the Meters version. It's like on the Meters version, that's what the guitar is doing. He's doing all those like little slides. I was like, maybe I can like interject those within the bass line. There's space to do that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that comes from. It's so fun to play.
Yeah. Yeah. Super cool tune. And I know a lot of the Meters stuff, but I can't say I actually know that track. So.
Oh man, check it out. It's great.
Yeah. Very cool. I like the title of the next one. It's called Irregardlessly.
I just come up with some just really stupid titles. I mean, they're instrumental songs, so it's not like you can title it after, what the chorus is or the hook or whatever. Yeah. So it's like you just, I have this like list in the notes on my phone of just like all these like, tunes that could be names for instrumental songs. And yeah. I think that might have been kind of that song is a collaborative effort. Like three of us in the band wrote it, and I forget how the name came about. I don't know. It's just one of those things we're just talking, and we just talking all kinds of stupid stuff, and somehow that just came up. So so it's one of the stupider titles, but fun.
Like it, and this one is a little bit more like kind of a cool, smooth R&B jam, right?
Yeah.
Get the right track again here. We'll just take a listen, and I wanted to ask you about a couple effects on this one too.
Cool.
So. That tone is just
thanks.
That's creamy. Yeah, that's enviable tone.
Oh, thanks,
that
man.
Is. Yeah.
That's the 63 blending the Noble DI with Jim Scott, the producer of the record. He had a great Ampeg B15 in the studio that we used. It was one of the later models, like one of the 70s models. So we did mic on that. I think it was just a an SM7 mic on it.
Okay.
Which I don't think I've ever even used for bass. Like usually if I go into a studio, it's like either an RE20 or a D112 or like a Sennheiser 421 or something. But he had that on the amp, and it sounded great, and it's just really came out with this really kind of squishy tone that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that it's not the mic you typically see, but that tone you can't argue with for sure. Yeah. So the RE20 is a pretty common one for that.
For sure, yeah.
And you got a couple effects on here that I'm just curious about. So the part is coming up. Another super cool part. So you got both the envelope filter going as well as the octave. So what are you using there?
So the envelope filter is the MXR envelope filter. It's called, what's it called? Envelope filter deluxe, whatever. The purple one, the purple sparkly pedal. Yeah, it's the MXR one, which I like a lot. Yeah. Octave pedal, another MXR. It's the called the vintage bass octave. It's like the little skinny blue one.
Yeah.
They made the little one, and I use that. It just fits on the pedal board great. It sounds great. So that's where that octave is, and it's just no dry signal. Just it's like the the original like analog Boss OC2 where you turn the dry signal all the way off and you get this sort of like subby synth kind of sound, which I love using, and I use it on a couple things like when I do my own gigs.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thanks.
And really nice synthy tone from it. And then Roasted, I was actually we'll play that one because I feel like that one might have been kind of a little bit Mule influenced song too.
Yeah, that's kind of like my little Southern rock sort of Allman Brothers ish kind of thing.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, that's just that the drum groove very reminded me of Matt Abs from Government, and we've talked about Randy Cook who's playing drums on it, who I'm a huge fan of. So.
Yep.
And just some killer guitar playing all over this track.
Yeah, Josh is great.
And this, like you said, Josh from Shania's band that brought you into Shania's band.
He's the one that brought me into Shania's band,
Yeah, and is that Round Wounds on the P?
Yeah. So this is the Alinto P bass.
Yeah.
With a little bit of a dark glass vintage microtubes pedal.
Oh yeah, just nice.
Little dirt.
That pedal's great because you can get just a little dirt or you can get a lot, and it's
great. I like it a lot.
Yeah, it took me a while to find something that you could just get the amount you wanted, and that was one of the first pedals that really did it. So.
I love that pedal. And in the intro, I've got MXR Phase 95.
Oh yeah, that's right. I knew there was the phase sound on there. That's it's got the 2 circuits.
It's you can do the script logo one or the the other one.
Yeah.
I forget what setting I used on it, but it's like I love playing with a pick with a phaser. Like I love that tone. So wherever I can like insert that, I'm all about it.
Well, it's worked. It worked a lot of spots on the record for sure. I know it's kind of weaved in throughout a few songs in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Woven, not weaved.
Yeah.
Weaving.
It's
irregardlessly.
Exactly. Yep.
I guess the other one that really stood out is, I dug the whole thing, but All Day Sucker, I didn't actually mention that. That's when I first, learned of Derek Frank. That's actually what I saw. I believe he'd done a YouTube video for it.
Yeah.
And because I know Randy, I think he'd either shared it or somehow I ended up seeing this video. So that was actually when I started checking you out at that point. And
Okay.
I learned a bit, but there's some slap riffs on there that are nasty.
And that one I did a while ago. That I did in 2014. Yeah. And just for the purpose of like putting a video out, because like we were talking about before we started the podcast, just the whole video thing, it's like content is kind of everything now. And so that was like 2014. Yeah. At the time I was doing, some gigs with my own band and hosting jam sessions in LA and stuff. And that song seeped into the set. I was kind of like, this would be a fun, like instrumental, it's a Stevie Wonder song. And I was like, it'd be cool one to do with like a Marcus kind of slap kind of melody thing. And so we started doing it on some gigs. And I decided to like do a video of it where like, it's just, it's kind of me playing everything, playing all the keys on it and playing bass. And then I had Herman Matthews play drums on it. Yeah. So we put it on the album as a bonus track because I'd never I hadn't done an album. I didn't have an album to put it on. So and I released it as a single, along with that video. But I was like, I'll include it as a bonus track. Yeah. So it's very different from the rest of the album because I was saying before, I'm not really doing any slapping on this album. Yeah. But that's the one tune that's kind of got that Marcus influence. Yeah. So it's a little different, But fun tune to play.
Yeah, sounds great. The bass solo on there, everybody should check out because there's a few things that. Make the eyebrows raise there. Cool. I was listening to it last night. Cool. Jesus.
A little bit of ear candy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the stuff, what's a friend of mine say? That's the stuff for the kids.
Right,
yeah. So, right. It pulls them in. Yeah. So, but there's, you did a cover of The Trooper on here. Really cool arrangement of that. I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan too. Cool. So obviously you're a Maiden fan growing up.
Oh, big time. Yeah, I love Iron Maiden. Still one of my favorite bands. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of figured I like doing covers. It's fun, and I knew I wanted to do a few covers on the album. Yeah. I don't know. I just kind of thought, hey, wouldn't it be crazy if we did an Iron Maiden song, instrumentally with organ playing the melody. Yeah. And I don't know, that one, it was one that we just tried. I'm like, I had the band rehearse before we went to the studio, and I was like, let's try this. And so I, kind of wrote out the melody for guitar and keys and all that. Yeah. And we kind of arranged it together as a band, and it just worked. We're like, this is kind of crazy, but it works. Yeah. And and so we decided to do it. And we do it at, when I do live gigs, we usually end the set with this because, nice. After you play that, you can't really go to anything else. It's
kind of hard.
Big, loud, fast tune, you know.
Yeah, and it really cool that like the octave bass breakdown that you put in there. That was super hip. It was
thanks.
Really,
we wanted to change it up a little bit and have it have like a cool guitar solo, not just keep the groove going, but do something kind of, you know, whatever jazzy with it, you know, something a little different, a little unique. So we kind of went to that whole halftime thing.
Yeah, just a super cool arrangement, and again, killer playing. So the players on the album are, you said, Josh Gooch.
Yep, Joshua Ray Gooch. He's you know, was with Shania for like 10 years, and we play together a lot, and he's just great. Such amazing, soulful guitar player.
Yeah.
He's incredible. So with the core band was Josh, and then our mutual friend Randy Cook on drums, guy from Toronto, been in LA for a handful of years now, and he's awesome, just such a pocket. And then Ty Bailey played keys. He's keyboardist that spent a lot of time in LA, definitely like a B3 specialist, like a vintage keys specialist, lives in Nashville now.
Yeah.
But that was the core band. Then we had a few guests on the record.
Yeah, you got Joe Bonamassa on the track.
Yep. He played a solo on a song, which was great. I was able to catch him. It was, you know, during the pandemic when no one was doing anything, so I just hit him up. I was like, would you be into doing something on the record? He's like, yeah, I'm not doing anything else. So
and
timing worked out.
Had you been connected with him through Brian?
Not through Brian. We had done a couple things together in LA. Like I first met Joe. There's a famous guitar shop in LA called Norman's Rare Guitars, and Norman wrote a book, and he had a book signing party, and Joe and Richie Sambora and Orianthi were scheduled to play, and the drummer that was. They called the drummer buddy of mine to like sort of put a rhythm session together for this thing. It was just a jam. It was just like, we're not going to even talk about it. We're just going to go up and play. And so he called, my buddy Anthony Buso, he called me, and I had like just gotten off a plane, and I like literally like I walked into the club like just as they were getting on stage putting their stuff on, like didn't even meet the guys ahead of time. It was just like, all right, like, run to the stage, plug in 1, 2, 3, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was just this jam with Richie, Ori, and Joe.
Yeah.
And obviously like Joe's such a monster. And like we had a good time playing, and then I ended up doing he guested on a Mindy Abair record.
Oh, nice.
So we played together again on that, and I, you know, had his info, and so, you know, when it was time to do something, I was like, I'm gonna call Joe, see if he'd be down to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, like I said, great album, and at Low End Nation, we're gonna pump it out for you here. So
thank you.
Yeah, we'll do a couple clips, because there's just so many killer bass parts on there that I think everybody needs to hear. So
cool.
Kind of digging back into, you know, what you're doing now. You know, you're playing with playing with one of the biggest artists in the world at the moment. Obviously, between the Shania and Gwen gigs, those are a couple of huge gigs. So I guess what advice would you have for anybody that wants to see themselves in that position? What are the things that, you know, obviously playing bass is the key to get in the door. Like you can't, we know that. But what are the things that you bring to the table that, you know, kind of keep you in that world?
I mean, first of all, you know, this stuff you've always heard, play for the song, you know. I think for me, one thing that's a very valuable skill, something I've been doing my whole career, is just be observant of the people that are doing the things you want to do. What do they do? What exactly are they doing that gets them hired? And that's kind of like what I've always done in LA. Like I definitely worked my way up to get to the gigs I'm doing now, and I auditioned for tons of stuff that I didn't get. Yeah. And after every audition, I would look at who did get the gig, and I'm like, okay, well, what does that person do? Not out of jealousy, but more out of like, what can I learn from this? Like obviously this person they thought was a better fit, and why? So I would try to learn from all those experiences, and just try and grow as a player, and just kind of develop skills that were useful to these gigs, that would get me hired on these gigs. Yeah. You know, so I would say, just being observant is the main thing, and just being open-minded and willing to learn from each experience. You know, when something doesn't go your way, don't get bitter about it, learn from it.
Yeah.
You know, that's something we've all heard just in life in general.
Yeah.
But I'd say, you know, bass-wise, first of all, just have your tone together, have your feel together. It takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of experience playing with bands, playing along with records, trying to absorb influence from players you like.
Yeah.
You know, if going the hired gun route is where you're headed, where you want to be, I just think you need to really be versatile, you know, be able to soak up a lot of different influences. Because if you're like just like a, you know, whatever, a Cliff Burton fan, if that's like your one influence, that's the main guy that you've listened to your whole life, you're not going to get hired by Shania Twain or Gwen Stefani. Like if that's like the way you play. But for me, it's like I've absorbed influence from so many different players and even guys like Tony Kanal from No Doubt, you know.
A guy we probably don't talk enough about either. He's
great,
great bass player, right?
Yeah, and he's sort of like, you know, as a band guy, not so much like a session bass hero guy. But man, like when I got that gig and I had to like dig into his parts and his tones, I was trying to like, you know, emulate him as best as I can. Obviously, I'm going to bring my own style to it as well, but I want to dig into that and do the music justice by, you know, trying to, you know, get as close to what he's doing as possible. But it was really cool getting into that, and because I had never really dug into him before. Yeah. And just getting to know his style and his tone was cool. But I think that's a big part of it. Dig into the tone and the style, not just the notes. You know? And also, you know, there's a whole thing with these gigs too. It's like, you know, image is a big thing in LA. Like casting is such a big part of it. So like, you know, and I've talked about this in interviews before. Like look at the people who are on the gig and like, how do they dress? How do they perform on stage? You know, you can't do one of these gigs and stand there staring at your feet, and you can't be wearing like khakis and a polo shirt. You know, it's like you got to be observant that like there's a certain look involved. There's a certain performance style involved. You know, and people don't think that's important. You know, of course it has nothing to do with music, but it has everything to do with getting gigs, you know.
And with putting on a show.
Yeah, absolutely. And people joke about this in LA. Like they'll say like, you know, some guy will move to LA and go to an audition, you know, wearing, you know, khakis and a polo shirt, whatever. And then you see him at the next audition looking like Steven Tyler. Because he learns from that. He's like, okay, well, you know, like this look isn't, you know, is not going to work in the music scene. Like, you have to look the part, you know, and, you know, I don't think it takes I don't think it takes much effort. I don't think it really takes you away from who you are as a person. It's just like, you know, getting some clothes and moving around on stage is just kind of part of what we do, you know?
Yeah, I heard Justin Hawkins from The Darkness on his podcast was talking about how what he learned to do was just accentuate the more extreme aspects of himself. And that was how he sort of built this rock persona. He's like, it's still me, but I'm just putting certain parts of it further out for people.
Yeah,
and it's kind of, because like you said, you're not really changing yourself. You're just finding a way to look cool and be who you are, right?
Yeah, I mean, people could say, well, that's not me. But, I mean, it can be, you know? You know, it's like I look at, like, when I was younger, like, you know, I didn't move around much. Like, you know, I was playing in a funk band, and I was the white guy nailed to the stage. I wasn't moving around at all, you know. And and you know, like I said, just being observant of like people that were doing the kind of things I wanted to do. You know, I just kind of learned that like, okay, well, you need to learn to like actually like perform on stage. And look cool.
And you're sort of playing a part, right? Like
absolutely.
You're
like,
a rock and roll bass player, and
and when I say casting has a lot to do with getting these gigs, it's what it is. And I've gotten emails about gigs where they're like, hey, we're casting, you know, Lady Gaga's band or whatever, and it's like, I hate when they say casting, but that's exactly what it is. You know, they're casting it.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it makes a lot of sense because at that level you're part of a show, not just part of a band.
Yeah, I mean it's entertainment. It's not, you know, when you're doing gigs like this, you know, like Shania, Gwen, whatever, these kind of big stages or whatever. It's entertainment. It's not just music, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Music is part of it, and that's something that, especially like when I started doing the Vegas residencies with these artists, where we had like dancers and like videos and all these different things. It's like, okay, well, the musical element is only one part of it.
Yeah,
you know, these people are known as singers, but like when it's this show, especially in Vegas, like it's, I mean, it's like the music is just one part.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, a small part of the whole picture. Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A couple of quicker questions, I guess. I like to ask people Desert Island bass album, if there's only one
bass
record.
Album.
Yeah, with one bass player.
Oh, man.
It's a tough one.
Bass player wise, that's a really tough one. I mean, you know, it'd have to probably be Paul McCartney, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
Nice.
If I could bring one album, you know, maybe Revolver or something.
Yeah.
Okay. But I've got my list of like some of the top 10, you know, but it's I've never thought of like bass albums, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, Paul McCartney's one of my favorite bass players of all time, and
the lines are just so melodic and fit between everything, and it's perfect, and it's it's frustrating that it's that perfect, and it's, you know, how do you learn to do that? Because that's one of those things that you can study for a long time, but it's still really hard to put lines together that well. So
man, it's amazing. I mean, Paul McCartney's bass lines are songs unto themselves. Like you could listen to it by itself, and it would be a song, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Over all these years of, you know, playing, and like you said, you've done shows to work your way up to these shows and everything you're doing, what would you say the thing is that you're most grateful for overall over this span of the career that you've had so far?
Man, I mean, I'm grateful for all of it. You know, the fact that I get to do this is crazy. Like I play in these arenas and stuff. I'm like, holy shit, I get to do this. It's amazing. I'm just grateful for all of it, you know, grateful for, you know, the opportunities that I've been given, grateful for, you know, the musicians that I've been able to play with, grateful for, you know, the older guys that I used to play with that would tell me I was doing something wrong, you know, that would be like, don't do this, do this. And, you know, those are lessons, you know, all the knowledge that people have given me. I'm just grateful for all of it, you know, 'cause it's all gotten me to where I am now, and I'm having a lot of fun doing what I'm doing. So, yeah.
Just in general, for anybody that's just starting playing music, what advice would you have for somebody that just wants to learn to play bass, whether they want to, you know, become a hired gun or just they want to have some fun and play?
I mean, well, first of all, just do it because you love it. You know, whether you're, like you said, doing it for fun or want to be a hired gun or want to be in a band or whatever, do it for the right reasons. You know, I played because I just loved it. It felt great. It wasn't like, oh, I could get rich doing this, or I could get a lot of chicks doing this. It was nothing like that. It was just, I love doing it. And I think that's why, you know, any of us need to start playing, just for the love of doing it, and the love of music. And I think those of us that are still doing it at this, you know, after however many years, I think it's just because of our love for music and for playing, you know. I mean, that's really the main reason.
Yeah, it's not for the money, that's for sure.
On paper, like, musicians have made horrible career choices. Like, you know, if you look at, you know, I even explain to people sometimes how the music industry works and how gigs work and auditions and all this stuff. And how, like, you know, you go through all this to get this one gig that might last a few months. It's a few month tour, and then it's over, and then you got to start over again. And it's like, I compare it to like somebody with like a real job. Like imagine if you like went through a whole interview process, this whole thing, and you got hired for this job. In a couple months, it was over, and you got to do it again. They're like, man, you know, F that.
And you know, nothing's ever certain, and it could all change tomorrow. So,
but wouldn't have it any other way.
100%.
It keeps life interesting.
That it does. Well, I want to thank you for coming in today. This is, you know, great way to kick off the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, hopefully the shows in Calgary go well, and I'm sure we'll catch you a little bit down the road too.
Cool. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
All right. Thank you.